Project FTL, Part 1, 9:14 a.m., January 22nd, 2022. Entry 1, Background. Today is the day we begin the tests. I'm nervous. Years of studying, preparation, and training have led up to this moment, and it holds suspense, as none of us know if this is going to work. Anything could go wrong at any given moment. Nearly every aspect of this experiment is completely unpredictable, and as scientists, that happens to be our biggest fear. The idea behind this project is quite simple as it is, but I'll try to explain it in as few scientific terms as possible. Take an electron. That electron, just like every other, has been around since the beginning of our universe. It travels, represents body after body as it outlives its husk and finds a new one. Each electron has a memory of these husks, where it's been, and what it's seen, and everything that electron has ever experienced. Memory is a tricky thing, but we here at Project FTL have reasons to believe it is stored in the quantum realm. Exploring said quantum realm is much like browsing the internet. This leads to the main idea. If we open up an electron, i.e. click the link and go through its memory or the website, could we send human consciousness to another point in time, as in time travel, or even send it to a quantum realm itself? In quantum physics, we view an electron as a wave. The amplitude represents the likelihood of an electron particle being there, the peaks representing the most probable location, the valleys representing the opposite. When two separate waves cross over one another or mix, they become one, now representing a singular electron wave. This is called superposition, and it cannot be undone, even if stretched for billions of light years. The organization running the project, Project FTL, thought that if we figured out just how to manipulate the vibrational frequency of a wave, assuming it stretches a reasonable distance, we could change the data it represents to whatever we want on both sides of the wave. We could get it to send a message, a song. Yes, for a brief time, the scientists at Project FTL wanted to rickroll the other side of the universe, or possibly even our own memories, provided that we discover the right neurological link to connect the neocortex to the machine, allowing all this to be possible. Legally, I'm not allowed to tell you the name of said device, but for the sake of this documentary, we'll just call it MAT, or MAT. 6 years after this idea was brought to the table in 2010, they tested short-length FTL communication for the first time. And then again, 149 tries later, we finally had our first success. Though it was possibly one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs since the discovery of quantum physics itself, it had to be hidden from the public. Still, being a vastly unexplored area of physics, scientists didn't want DIY channels on YouTube to get hold of it. This was and still is potentially dangerous. Also, much more profitable for the big guys if the public doesn't discover the solution to FTLC before we do. There's an admittedly huge marketing opportunity here. A new way for our whole universe to operate. It's the future. Now, after another 6 years later, we're ready. All that's left to do is run the calculations over one last time. I would explain to you how the machine works, but I myself don't know. Well, I have a fraction of an understanding. Laser beams essentially hold the electron in place by trapping it in its own light rays, but I haven't a clue how to use it. Only the lead scientists know, because they invented it. And that's how it's supposed to be. Less risk. I'm just an analyst. I review the numbers and the calculations of it all before it's tested, and they handle the machinery. We plan to test tomorrow, and there's excitement in the air, but also a great deal of fear. We are all terrified of the possible results. Assuming this does work and we get a response, this opens a new branch of questions. Who or what are they? Where are they? Do they want to help or kill us? And if it doesn't work, that means we are most likely alone in the universe. Which one is scarier? I suppose we'll see tomorrow. 2:48 a.m., January 23rd, 2022. Entry 2, Experiment. It worked. Once the proper programming was set, a simple "does anybody receive this message" was logged and sent into the vast sea of galaxies. Nerves were high. Many of the scientists at Project FTL jittered and jumped, clutching food and drink, or simply scrolling through social media to pass the time. Not a word was spoken until a high-pitched beep from the monitor announced a response.
Yes.
It was rough and hardly human. The specialists who created the machine put little effort into making this model have the voice of a pop star, but it was easily distinguishable. Shocked and startled glances were shared amongst the room, soundless enough to hear the gust of wind sip through the leaves of the outside trees. After a startled pause, the lead scientists jumped from their various places around the corridor and bolted for the machine, inviting us to do the same. Some followed, others were still in shock, and a distinct few were already rationalizing the events in their heads, ruling out and blocking off the possibilities. Many were too afraid of what would come next, and understandably so. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved. Dr. Gabriel swiftly enabled the attached microphone, fingers flying across the keyboard. The red light at the base of the mic flashed to life. With a hesitant determination, perspiration beginning to drip down the front of his balding head, he spoke. "Who am I speaking to?" Dr. Gabriel's voice trembled. Almost instantly, a response followed the beat.
I have countless.
Brows were raised among the crowd, scientists and assistants alike, now surrounding the machine with curiosity. Mind sharing some of them? A brief pause, then a beat. The entity behind the machine listed off several, some consisting of sounds and syllables no human on Earth could make. Various sounds and effects seemingly stitched together, but one stuck out above all, causing panic, gasps, and small chatter among the rest of us, sparking an electric jolt in all of our hearts.
God.
I'm sorry, did you say God?
Yes, I am God. A pleasure to meet you, Ralph.
Silence, utter silence, and a tension which suffocated us when the main question on all our minds was spoken into the flashing microphone. How do you know who I am?
I know everything. I am everything. You are me, I am you.
More questioning looks spread around the room like a plague, tension rising. What does that mean exactly? Said Dr. Gabriel.
I am you, and everything surrounding you. I am the mountains and the species in the world beyond. The very thoughts you're thinking of, even the floor you're standing on.
The skittish man with thick brown hair and glasses taking notes and recording the conversation in a yellow paper notebook, his pencil scratching against the paper, he was God? Dr. Gabriel staring into the mic with a furrowed brow, his plump stomach pressing against his tight-fitting dress shirt, he was God too? Me, a thin redhead with loose curls and freckle-painted skin? I am God? Questions continue to fly, anything from what's my dad's name to more complex scientific questions such as the Fermi paradox.
You would be ignorant to assume you have the privilege of being the only source of life in the oceanic waves of the galaxy,
it had responded, forcing the man who had asked shamefully to retreat to the back of the crowd, embarrassed.
How do we die?
Someone shouted nervously. It had been Cassie, my assistant analyst. She was a nice enough woman, a bit shy and always blushing, but very bright and efficient.
Humans, I mean. Do we have an extinction level event?
A brief pause, then the beat.
Yes.
None of us had any desire to spoil our fate, but no one dared to stop her. We were all just painfully intrigued, even against our own better judgment.
What causes it?
Curiosity.
This answer left us with only the cool blade of anxiety in our spines. No real answer, yet all the information in the world. We are our own damnation. We're still asking questions, recording answers for better or for worse. Many of us regret following through with this experiment. I know I do. Sometimes knowledge is kept a secret for a reason. We were not meant to know how we came to be or how it will end. I don't know. I'm tired. I need sleep or coffee. I want to see my wife, Jen. It's been 2, maybe 3 days since I've challenged a winding drive through the woods to our house. Jen has always dreamed of moving to Korea, and I planned on making that come true when this experiment was over. I needed the money, and this paid a very pretty penny. Hopefully this is as far as they want us to take this little quest. I will update soon. I plan to spend a few days at home, then return to see the progress we made. I'm not convinced this will end with locking an interdimensional communication system peacefully in a storage unit. 7:12 a.m., January 26, 2022. Entry 3. Cash prize. God, I needed that vacation. Sleep, food, and quality time with Jen was precisely the right remedy. Unfortunately, I may not get that privilege again soon. I had hoped this Q&A would be the end of Project FTL. It had every reason to be. We had discovered how to achieve FTL via quantum superposition. Not only that, but we also used it. That was our goal. Yet still we continue. FTLC was just one mission in a much larger chain which we had not originally been informed of. Of course, I have the option to opt out. We all do. In fact, Jen had insisted I do so. But the money. Our still faceless bosses offered triple the original pay, coming out at several million in the endgame, once all goals were achieved. I could take my money now and move Jen and I to Korea, buy a mediocre apartment or townhouse, and live happily in a month maximum. With the final payment, however, we could afford a mansion, or maybe a nice cottage house and a business to bring full-time profit. Of course, I want the best for her, for us. I plan on pulling through to the end, collect my money, then leave as quickly as possible. Greed? Maybe. I call it a promise of success. Jen deserves the world, and I will do everything in my power to give it to her. Our bosses want us to, inspired by information given by our new God friend, go to him. Mentally, of course. We can do this by transmitting one of our consciousnesses into a quantum realm. Another term for God, maybe better described as a hub, via superposition. Basically, we just build a neurological link onto our original machine, do some science that even I'm not sure I understand, and our mental being is linked to the hub. This, as you may have guessed, can go horribly wrong in countless ways. The chosen mind can be corrupted, overflow with information, drive a person mad. And that's all assuming the machine works well. If there's even a slight miscalculation in the system, it could send a shockwave into the brain and turn the host into a vegetable. The science is iffy, experimental, and so is the mission. But it's money, not to mention a huge scientific discovery, a breakthrough. Even the idea, talking face-to-face, mind, with God himself, is revolutionary and extremely dangerous. I will add another entry once we are ready to test the machine. It may be a while, as there is still research needed if we wish to achieve our goals. I, along with many others, have doubts and concerns. Most of us, in fact, have these thoughts. All we can do now is follow the more confident ones and pray. Not that God cares much. Part 2. 5:03 p.m., December 11th, 2022. Entry 4. Lockbox. Apologies for the delay. It's been a rough year. A quick rundown. We discovered that memory is not only who we are, but is actually a biological response to learning new information. When we receive new knowledge, the synapses in our brain shift and remap, creating a new pattern of sorts. Both the universe and the quantum realm operate in a similar manner, hence the phrase by Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, if you split a log, I'm there. A universal bond. On a less convenient note, we deducted that our consciousness cannot be transferred to God because our personalities and awareness are God. In shorter and less scientific terms, he is more of a universal memory lockbox than an actual being. This means that we wouldn't be sending our consciousnesses to him, but vice versa. Our memory would then process all the information in the known and unknown universe. The neurons in our brain cannot process this much information. A tsunami of data that large would send us into hyperdrive, essentially causing every cell in our brain to explode. Every universal synapse from the past, present, and future would force the brain into a total biological and physical remap. Even the obvious risks, the men in charge requested us to carry on with the experiment. Dr. Staxman, one of the lead scientists and one of the more attractive doctors. The rest of the men and women on this project looked like pimply kids with glasses who sat alone in high school. And in all fairness, most of us were. Tried to convince them that using the machine on an actual man would almost certainly kill him. Unfortunately, even with the ironclad data presented, their orders never wavered. We spent several days deciding on how to select the human guinea pig when we concluded that it should be a volunteer. None of us could do it, as everyone here had a role to play regardless of how small. That left John Doe, some innocent sap from the streets. Not ideal, but what choice did we have? We put out flyers, obviously not giving anything away other than the available position labeled volunteer. After receiving a surprising number of responses, we filtered out with personality, sobriety, and general health testing, narrowing our group down to 4. This is a top-secret program, Dr. Gabriel had said, shoulders stiff with a stern tone to match. The likelihood of success is extremely slim, and you very well might die. Please, if you don't have the stomach, leave now. At first, no one budged. The bald man on the right gave the long-haired man beside him a questioning look, his patterned yarmulke popping against the midnight curls. The man beside joined in on the staring contest, his thick glasses warping the scenery behind them. A tall, slender man stood at the end, silent hands buried deep in the pockets of his olive green raincoat, brow tilting downwards with a grimace. The Jewish man was first to leave, followed by the man with glasses. The remaining 2 stayed, receiving somber yet courageous looks from the staff. We knew the risks. We knew that the families of these 2 brave men would likely never know what happened to them if something did go wrong, and we knew that it would be our faults if it did. We spent a day giving these men instructions and brief training, making them sign confidentiality forms and preparing them for what they might see and what to do in said scenarios. We put them in tomorrow. I will update before and after trial 1. Wish us luck. And for the record, I do not support this particular aspect of the project. I am simply an employee. Jesus, I sound like a Nazi. What happened to the world? 5:54 a.m., December 12th, 2022. Entry 5. Preparation. 6 minutes before we begin. The slender man lays reclined in a glass chamber beside the bald man, tubes and IV systems entering their forearms. Both look frightened, as expected. We are as well. Dr. Gabriel is preparing them now. The guinea pigs will talk their way through the experiment, describing everything they see, while one of the note-takers writes down every word. Hopefully, this will give us some understanding of how to improve on the accessibility aspect of superposition. The only problem? The chances of them keeping their sanity for more than 50 seconds is frighteningly low, 10,000 to 1. It's time to begin. Wish us luck. Though if you're reading this at all, it probably didn't do us any good. 6:23 a.m., December 12th, 2022. Entry 6. Symphony. I haven't had enough time to properly process what happened. It went by so fast. We failed and succeeded at the same time. A success at the cost of our humanity. Each and every one of us will make a formal statement and description of the events that transpired to assist in the overall review. My story will be linked below. Read at your own risk. Edit notes. Dr. Caviel stood stiff, hands buried in his lab coat, pockets, and a furrowed brow. After finishing his speech and clarifying instructions, he walked calmly back to his desk, pushing himself into typing position. It was time to turn on the machine. "Are you both ready?" he asked, fingers waiting to seal their fate. They agreed in unison. Fingers flying on the keyboard, the overhead dish of the machine began to whir. We had connected a speaker to the neurotransmitter as well, so we could hear what they heard and get a rounder image of what they experienced. In an instant, several things occurred. The patient's eyes lolled back in their heads. The speakers began to emit some unearthly hum, a musical note which made all art seem counterfeit. It was a mix that was beautifully distorted and quietly unnerving. Next, the patients began mumbling prefixes to words, few holes amongst the parts. The next occurrence was the least expected. Several staff and sound workers surrounding the speakers began mimicking the patients. Their eyes rolled backwards, drool spilling from their mumbling lips. Everyone in this shared trance spoke in unison, uttering the same half-hearted words, screaming, not from the trance but from the speakers. It sounded distant. Hundreds of thousands of voices called to us. These people, voices, things, they were clearly in pain, suffering, howling, and begging for help with no response. The humming got louder, followed closely by mumbling. The two sources combined to make an eerie chant, nearly a rhythm of whimsical vowels and that same tuned moaning, all coming together in one forbidden frequency. The men who had not fallen victim to this tune quickly began attending to the ones who had, snapping their fingers and trying to break them free, tones only increasing in volume. The only logical solution was to shut it down. Making eye contact with Dr. Caviel, I could sense he came to the same conclusion. Bolting towards the machine seemed to trigger something in a trance. On cue, with his first step, the hum pulsed quickly and mumbling shifted from ritualistic to predatorial. In unison, they began chasing Dr. Caviel, clawing at the air in front of them like zombies, leaping over chairs and desks, spilling papers and data, violently throwing themselves across the room with no regard for their own safety. They were reduced to animals. Two tackled him. Then, one by one, they piled atop his plump figure, ruthlessly beating him. Several employees attempted to pull them off to no avail, so I made my move. The control panel was blocked by all the chaos, so flipping the off switch wasn't an option. Pulling the plug was, though. Coiling black cables ran from the machine's rear to the far wall of the corridor, where they attached to their own independent generator. Pushing my fear aside, I made my way across the room. Several trants looked up, heads flinging backwards on their necks in a grotesque spasm, staring with the whites of their eyes as if challenging me to continue. I refused to stop, grabbing a broken lamp from the floor as self-defense. Both my lungs and heart pounded in my chest, already winded from the stress and urgency of the adrenaline flooding in my veins. 4 trants left Dr. Caviel, now throwing themselves in my direction. Not 1 second did their expression change. No emotion or fear, a frightening lack of self-regard or awareness. 3 skidded around the desk, slipping and sliding on the marble floor. 1 lunged over the desk, belly flopping to the ground and instantly charging me. It was my assistant, Cassie. Her form was there, rapidly nearing, but she wasn't. Her golden brown eyes were replaced by an absent and demonic white. I didn't think. I didn't have time. I jabbed at the beast as it lunged, wincing and looking away as the broken metal rod sunk into Cassie's throat. Looking back wasn't an option. I continued, one leg after another, barely taking in my surroundings as I grabbed the cables in my hands and pulled with all my might. They resisted at first, pulling back, but eventually gave in. Blue and gold flashes of electricity, a piercing cry and buzz from the speakers, interrupting and halting the hum. Cool floor pressing against my cheek, a crack in my glasses. My mouth tasted of sand, an utter lack of moisture, as if every drop of saliva had been extracted at once. I briefly scanned the room, eyes squinting and darting in search for my assistant, when I saw her. Cassie lay, hands clasped tightly around her throat, blood seeping from the slits between her fingers, flooding her mouth, pouring onto her cheek and the floor beneath. She gargled, struggled for breath, writhing in agony on the floor. I simply stood at a distance, watching her purple blouse stain red. The process was a long one, each second elongated as shock overtook my mind. The life sifted from her eyes, light and color escaping her husk as her muscles relaxed. Bloodied arms sunk to the floor beside her, splashing in a pool of blood. Cassie was gone. I had killed her. 2:37 a.m. December 15th, 2022. Entry 7. Beautiful moon. What have I done? I killed a woman who had yet to turn 27. Cassie had not yet experienced life. I cut her off before her time. The guilt overwhelms me. I can barely stand it. 7 other employees at Project FTL died that day. When the connections were lost, the trance immediately fell to the floor, blood and brain tissue rapidly oozing from their eyes, noses, and ears. Even knowing that Cassie was dead, with or without my assistance, provides no comfort. My mind is filled with the flooding despair of knowing that I pulled her plug just as I had pulled the machines. I typed this entry from beneath my sheets, my wife sleeping softly beside me. Telling her what I've done is the right and honorable thing to do. I'm sure she would understand. No, it's better if she doesn't know. I'm not supposed to tell her anyway, as my contract forbids it. I break this rule occasionally. I trust my wife Jen with my life, just not with the one I stole. She doesn't deserve the stress and burden of knowing. Why risk altering her view of me? Why risk losing what I value most? I don't know if I'll be back at Project FTL. The work is far from done, but I don't know if I can bear to be in that room again. The same room where... But Korea, Jen. I had made a promise to myself that I would give her the life she's always dreamt of. The higher-ups gave each one of us some severance money and time off due to the tragedy. It's enough to buy a mid-sized apartment, enough to buy a small home near the Changjiagung Palace if I liquidate our current house. This would give us a small amount of savings and enough to live comfortably. We both grew up poor, so living lean every now and again was our definition of living comfortably. I was offered another job regarding Project FTL. They want us to build and modify the machine to create a sort of pathway to him by manipulating electrons. With the payout, I could buy a Korean castle. I'd much rather spend time with my darling. I go to comfort and hold her, and all I see is my blood-drenched hands. Cassie lurks and shadowy memories, flashes of anxiety. The only cure I want now is Jen. I'll end it here. Typing this much might wake her. She needs a rest. Hell, so do I. Project FTL gave me a chance to fix our lives, to provide and care for Jen, to give her the world and all the stars in the sky. This job started my life, and if I keep accepting these follow-ups, it may very well destroy it. Part 3, 2:27 p.m., June 4th, 2023. Entry A, Recovery. I've finally put Project FTL behind me. It was for the best. I finally have a chance to be happy, to focus on myself and start a family with Jen. We had our eyes set on a specific house near the center of Seoul, so we bought it. We are shipping our furniture and larger items as I type this. We fly out in a little over a week. I'm excited. We both are. This has been our dream since the beginning of our relationship. Without a doubt, Project FTL continues without me. Every time I think about what they could be doing, I remember Cassie, her blood-stained blouse, her demonic white eyes. 8 men and women died that day, and still the higher-ups are blindsided by the risks. Maybe they do know and just don't care. Jen still doesn't know about Cassie's death. I refuse to pass my burden on to her. Even after 6 months since it happened, the wounds bleed fresh. To this day, I see her in dreams, the hole in her throat, a bloody shiv in my hand. I'm a murderer. It doesn't matter. Soon we'll be leading a new life, away from the quantum experiments and phone calls to God, away from our old selves and their mistakes. A clean slate. It'll be refreshing to finally put genuine distance between myself and that damn lab. My hope is that I never have to publish this. I don't want to cause trouble or scare the public unnecessarily, but if Project FTL puts me or my wife in danger again, I'm sending every word to any major news station that will take it. I'll choose Jen's well-being over a confidentiality contract every time, even if that means incriminating myself and my colleagues to ensure it. 8:12 p.m., June 14th, 2023. Entry 9. Awakening. The airport has been crowded, packed nearly shoulder to shoulder with families beginning their summer vacations, angsty teens glued to cell phones, and panicked parents rushing to make their flights. I sat in a row of plastic blue chairs, Jen to my right, a nervous black man with a shaved head and brown patterned glasses to my left. Meeting family or just sightseeing? I asked, making conversation with the man in a desperate attempt to pass time. A startled and confused look crossed his face. Tourism? No, it's a business thing, the man replied, his rich voice brutally contradicting his stature. You? We're moving there. Fresh start. I leaned over to grab Jen's hand as I spoke. This sparkled talk of his family, 3 kids and a wife, Laurie. He and I talked for a while. His name had been Isaac, and he was headed on a marketing mission, though he never told me what exactly he sold. Some sort of sanitation product, I gathered. Then my phone rang. It was Dr. Staxman. Sorry, I must take this, I said, puzzled, walking away from the conversation and putting the phone to my ear. Hello? Hello? Staxman? What?
He's coming,
he screamed before I could finish, panic and fear evident through the airport's buzz of unknowing citizens. A high-pitched whir sounded behind his voice, the same tune which had come from the machine all those months ago. He was back.
Oh, God, please help us. Please, for the love of...
A loud static explosion echoed, then the low beep of a lost connection. I didn't need to ask what happened. I could see it with my own eyes. In the distance, a large circular ball of violet light erupted, followed closely by a shockwave which flew past buildings and through the thin pane of airport glass, knocking me and several civilians on their asses and shattering every window in sight. A large matching beam shot up into the sky. Bright swirls of otherworldly colors wound and pulsed through the center of the beam, slithering up and down the new architecture. Without thinking, I stood up and ran to where Jen was seated, throwing my arms over my head as a shield from the raining glass. Glancing up, I could see a growing tear in the sky. Reality's fabric pulling back to reveal an eye larger than Earth itself, a large midnight pupil surrounded by a moving swirl of planets, galaxies, and universes, a bright, colorful ocean of life and matter. Hundreds of men and women and children made the mistake of staring into that eye with awe and wonder. Before anyone could process what was happening, neon vines of plasma shot down, swirling in the sky and attacking the minds of innocent beings, penetrating their eyes, noses, and mouths, latching to and replacing their consciousnesses. The vines, cut off from their source, winding down and shrinking in length before disappearing entirely into the victims. Standing, absent, all beginning the process of mental consumption, their souls replaced by a hive mind we call God, all sinking together as one. Jen. Pushing and shoving my way through the tranced crowd, my only goal was to protect her at all costs. Shrinking neon vines and tranced souls surrounded me, each shaking and struggling at first, then mumbling those eerily familiar, half-hearted words. It was too late for them, but I would not let my darling become another Cassie. Look down, I yelled, spotting her near the broken window, looking up with a frightened look. Jen, don't look at it. Look down. We made eye contact, her features illuminated by the growing cracks in our universe. She was just as beautiful as the day I met her, just as young, just as perfect. A thin needle of pain struck my heart as I saw true and genuine fear in her eyes for the first time, followed by heart-splitting melancholy as I saw I was too late. The plasma struck her back, branching off into glowing tentacles encircling her form, slithering into any opening to infest her mind. She struggled at first, shaking and flailing against the beams, but eventually gave in. Her eyes rolled backwards, and her lips moved in unison with the others, joining in with the ritualistic song. I embraced her, barely noticing Isaac standing beside her absently as I tackled her to the floor and held her in my arms. Tears poured without my knowing, blurring my vision as I grabbed at the vines. Sharp, hot pain smothered my palms. I barely noticed as I tried to pull them from her mind, but my efforts were in vain. They disappeared, and I was left only with an empty husk. Jen was gone. I had failed her too. Refusing to let go, I cried against her shoulder, letting my tears wet her black felt overcoat. I did everything I could to wake her, refusing to believe she was gone, refusing to believe she had been reduced to a victim. She would wake up. She had to. What would I do without her? She couldn't leave me. It wasn't fair. No, she won't leave. She can't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. 11:37 p.m. June 14th, 2023. Entry 10. Rabbit Hole. Jen lays on the men's bathroom floor. I cleaned the blood from her face with a wet paper towel and brushed her hair with the comb she kept in her purse. Her head rests in my lap as I type what will likely be my final entry. Not that it matters. There's not going to be a damn soul to read this. The cracks are growing, swallowing the earth and the universe surrounding it. This entry is more for me than anyone else. I imagine I don't have much time left either. I can hear the distant rumbling, the same musical tone from the machine now coming from the sky itself, and a beautiful chorus. Project FTL was a mistake. Humans are not meant to venture beyond space or time. Some call it a continuum, some call it a matrix, some call it a galaxy, but really it's a guideline. It's a border between us and the unknown, a wall placed for our own good. I realize that now, but it's too late. The matrix took Jen from me. No, I killed Cassie myself with my own hands, and Jen was my fault as well. Maybe if I hadn't joined Project FTL, none of this would have happened. I'm the reason she died. My own greed put us in this airport, and it's the reason the entirety of mankind is about to be sucked into an eternal void. There's no fixing a broken universe. This is it. I can feel the Earth's gravity shifting, swaying slightly in varying directions. Loud rumbling in that musical choir, barely audible behind the crushing loss. I don't even care that everything is ending. Not about Isaac or his family. Not for the billions of families out there. I feel nothing for the deteriorating world around me. God took my soul just as he took Jen's. 10:03 a.m., January 7th, 2023. Entry 11, Genesis. What is this place? 1 minute I was falling, holding my wife as we flew through galaxies and colorful continuums, organs rotating and dancing merrily in my stomach as we fell through the vast sea of galaxies, alien worlds and colorful stars. Now I'm here. But where is here? It looks like home. A bright yellow sun surrounded by blue sky, white fluffy clouds casting occasional shadows. Pale snow blankets the ground, bitter air pierces my skin, but it can't be. My home was destroyed, eaten by God's void, yet here I am. Before we were consumed, I transferred this journal to a hard drive and stowed it away in my inner coat pocket in case my body was found by some other race or people. I thought maybe knowing what happened to me could protect them from making the same mistakes. It was mostly a far-fetched way for me to make up for what I'd done. Pathetic, I admit. After I awoke in a field freezing from the cold, I walked towards the towering buildings in the distance. Spokane, Washington. the home of Project FTL, the very place where the hole in the sky opened. But something was different. The structure of the buildings was square and more symmetrical. The placement was irregular and more complex than it had been. A prison of reflective glass buildings and whirring motors. Walking into the city itself was suffocating. Small differences laced in a breathtaking new reality. Some things were more advanced, cars, clothing, and advertisements on billboards, but most was far beneath what it once was. Everything was eerily similar, yet completely different, including the date, nearly 5 months behind my world. I've had a few hours since I've arrived here to ponder. I'm sat now in a McDonald's on Main Street typing this on a small MacBook I bought from a local mall with what little cash transferred with me. My best guess, this isn't my world at all. When God swallowed my earth, it must have sent different parts of it to varying universes. That would explain why the cracking walls of the men's bathroom didn't fall on top of me, or why Jen wasn't lying beside me. Theories about the multiverse have been played with frequently throughout sci-fi movies and novels, but to actually experience it is something quite different entirely. In this realm, your realm, Project FTL never happened. In fact, it seems quantum physics has been ignored for the most part, aside from the Marvel franchise. Superposition, FTL, electron waves, all these terms were easily recognized on my Earth, but here it's essentially a foreign language. Comic book superheroes are more well known than general science. The number of universes is unknown, but the odds are I have a doppelganger somewhere on this planet. I wonder who I am here. Am I married to Jen? Did we finally move to Korea like we planned? Does she even exist? It doesn't matter. I've lost everything. I have no purpose. The love of my life is dead, and for all I know, her other self is in prison or deceased. My job doesn't exist. My home in the woods is replaced by a mid-sized town between Canada and Spokane. I have nothing. With nothing to live for, the answer is simple. End it. I could help protect this world, keep it from making the same mistakes we did, be its guardian, and make a new purpose for myself. But this universe already has me, I imagine. It's simply not worth it. I don't condone suicide, but these are extraordinary circumstances. I could stow away in a Korean apartment like we had planned, but without her, what's the point? Without my darling, I'm nothing. I'm done. I give up. I'm uploading this here as a warning. My way of protecting you all. I don't care how curious this planet may become. Don't mess with God. Don't mess with quantum realm. The Matrix was built to protect us. Being in a cage doesn't always mean you're the prisoner.